Hi, and welcome to today's live reading from a book, Signing to Die For by Judy Moore, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits, Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The tiny white-haired woman stood with her hands on her hips, frowning down at the college student typing on his laptop. You know, this isn't the public library, young man. You sit in here, you have to buy something. The curly-haired college kid glanced up at her sheepishly and pulled down the lid of his laptop. Sorry, he said, quickly pushing his books into his backpack. This isn't the first time, the elderly woman continued, wagging her forefinger at him. Beck O'Rourke scurried across the bookstore to join them. Now, Granny, Brandon usually buys a cup of coffee or a lemonade. It's not busy today, so I didn't see any harm in letting him study here. Brandon gave her a thankful smile, but stood up and quickly left. When he opened the front door, the salty smell of sea air and a warm ocean breeze wafted inside. Alice O'Rourke sighed at her granddaughter. You're much too nice to ever be successful in the business world, Beck. You need to take some tips from your old grandmother. Beck groaned. They had had this squabble many times before. He's just going to go somewhere else where they won't care if he doesn't buy anything. Fine, let him. He can use one of their tables, her grandmother retorted. Beck exhaled wearily. If we're not nice to the customers, we're not going to have any. I am nice to the customers, her grandmother grumbled. The ones who buy something and pay. I believe that is the definition of a customer. Okay, Grammy, Beck whispered in exasperation. Just don't make a fuss in front of the other customers. She hurried back to the cash register where a tourist waited to buy a newspaper. Beck and her grandmother owned Beach Read's bookstore together. It was a gift from Beck's widowed mother, who had been swept off her feet by a wealthy Canadian snowbird, married him, and moved to Montreal 2 years before. Beck grew up in the bookstore, and some of her fondest memories were of curling up in an armchair in a cozy corner of the store reading. As her mother before her, Beck adored mysteries and read every one she could get her hands on. Her mother had even named her after her favorite mystery character, Rebecca, by Daphne de Maurier. Not surprisingly, the shelves of the bookstore were heavily slanted toward mysteries, although they also had a wide selection of biographies, historical fiction, classics, and, of course, bestsellers. Only a block from the Atlantic Ocean in Manatee Beach, Florida, Beach Reads wasn't just a bookstore. It was a gathering place for locals to have a cup of coffee and a muffin in the morning, or a cold drink and a sandwich on a warm afternoon. A dozen small tables with cheery seashell print tablecloths filled half the store, and the other half contained several shelves of books and other reading materials. Armchairs and ottomans were arranged into alcoves amongst the books, as well as in front of the bay window that looked out onto Ocean Avenue. Tourists regularly popped in to buy a paperback or a magazine for the beach, or to cool off after they'd stayed out in the sun too long. At the back of the store stood a long counter where customers could buy scones, muffins, or Danish that Grammy brought in daily from the bakery down the block, as well as a variety of teas and coffees. Beck wished they could offer lattes and smoothies too, but Grammy wanted nothing to do with noisy blenders in the bookstore, and Beck had to admit she was right. They kept their food and drink selection simple. For lunch, they offered a couple of different gourmet sandwiches, usually tuna fish, shrimp salad, or another of Grammy's secret creations. The kitchen was Grammy's domain, and she ruled it like an iron chef. While she wasn't always easy to work with, Grammy's crusty personality was popular with locals, as well as with snowbirds who returned to South Florida each winter. They could see right through her gruff exterior, and even they couldn't her famous cranberry walnut salad sandwiches drew them back to the store over and over again. On the back wall of the kitchen was a huge, colorful painting of an underwater scene with tropical fish swimming around a large loggerhead turtle. Loggerheads nested on Manatee Beach early each summer, and the babies scampered to the ocean about 2 months later. The turtles were vigilantly protected by residents and had become an ever-present symbol in the seaside community. A life-size sculpture of a loggerhead stood on the sidewalk outside the bookstore. The kitchen was also the favorite hangout of the family's pet Great Dane, a gentle giant named Coquina, whose temperament was as docile as any dog Beck had ever encountered. The huge gray dog with the doe-like eyes may have been a pussycat in personality, but her huge presence in the store made Beck and her grandmother feel safer. Coquina typically sprawled in a corner of the kitchen, enjoying the aromas, lapping up any spillage, and taking frequent naps. The last member of their South Florida family, now that Beck's mother had moved to Canada with her new husband, was Beck's little sister, Lizzie. 10 years younger than Beck at 19, Lizzie had zero interest in the family business and didn't even like to read. Her primary diversion was the boys she met on the beach where she was a lifeguard. She seemed to have a different one on her arm every weekend. Today was no exception. Dressed in her red lifeguard gym shorts and t-shirt, Lizzie arrived with a deeply tanned surfer boy in tow, complete with peroxide nearly white hair. "Hey, sis," Lizzie said, plopping down in a chair at a table next to the one that Beck was bussing. She released her copper red hair from the clip that held it, and long curly locks cascaded down her back. "Can we get a couple of lemonades?" Beck wrinkled her brow and kept wiping the table. "You know where the drinks are, Lizzie. Get them yourself." Lizzie's bottle lip jutted out as she sent her older sister the same mournful look she had been giving her since she was a toddler. "Come on, Beck. It's hot out there. I'm exhausted, and I only have a 15-minute break." Beck let out a long breath and shook her head. "You heard me. Please, Beck," Lizzie almost whined. "You know Grammy doesn't like me going back there." Pursing her lips, Beck turned toward her kitchen. "Okay, Lizzie, this time, but one of these days, you're gonna have to start doing things for yourself." As a self-satisfied smile settled onto Lizzie's lips, Beck glanced at the young man in the bathing suit and tank top sitting across from her. "Can I at least get an introduction?" Before Lizzie could respond, the boy looked up shyly and extended his hand. When he smiled, dimples appeared. "I'm Teddy," he said. "Teddy Davis." "Teddy's a great surfer," Lizzie beamed. "Problem is, he's distracting me from my duties, and I don't want somebody to drown because I can't take my eyes off of him." "Don't worry," Teddy responded with a self-conscious grin. "I'm a good swimmer. I can always help you out." "Well, Teddy," Beck asked, "would you like lemonade or something else? Iced tea, a soda?" "Water's fine, thanks." He spoke with a slight southern accent and obviously had good manners. Lizzie interjected, "Bring us both a lemonade, would you, Beck? I know he wants one too. He's just too polite to ask." Teddy started to protest, but Beck was already heading for the kitchen. As she prepared their glasses, Grammy asked curiously, "Who's the new one? I was just getting used to the old one." Getting to like the old one. Beck chuckled. "Surfer boy named Teddy." Grammy squinted her eyes and peered at her granddaughter's latest boyfriend. "Looks like he has a few muscles in those arms. Let's get him to help us out tonight." Tonight, Beck's favorite part of being a bookstore owner was taking place, a book signing. Beach Reads regularly hosted well-known authors who lived in the area or were passing through on a book tour to give a speech and then sign books that audience members bought from the store. Grammy loved the signings too because a well-known author meant a big sales for the day for the bookstore. The guest author tonight was Marcia Graybill, a famous cozy mystery writer from New England. Her latest mystery had even made the New York Times bestseller list. Her heroine was a amateur detective who owned a bed and breakfast inn in a tiny hamlet in Vermont that had seen more murders than Miami during the 80s. Some of the plots were pretty far-fetched, and Beck always figured out who the murderer was about halfway through, but she couldn't resist them. She'd read all but the author's latest book, which she planned to get signed that night. When Beck returned to Lizzie's table with their lemonade, Grammy followed, so did Coquina. "Whoa," Teddy exclaimed. "That's a big dog." The Great Dane walked up to Lizzie and nuzzled her for attention. "Her name's Coquina," Lizzie told him as she patted the dog. Teddy's eyes flashed a look of surprise. That great big dog is named after that little tiny seashell?" Beck grinned. She couldn't resist the irony when she came up with the dog's name and was thrilled when someone got it. Exactly. Finally, her sister had brought home a smart one. Lizzie rolled her eyes. "My sister has a weird sense of humor." Lizzie directed her attention back to the dog and went into baby talk mode. "We're adorable no matter how stupid our name is, aren't we, Coquina?" Lizzie had never been crazy about her own old-fashioned given name either. Elizabeth, another of their mother's favorite literary characters from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Lizzie gave the dog a hug around the neck and a kiss on her large forehead, and then took a sip of her lemonade. Beck caught her sister's eyes and nodded toward their grandmother with raised eyebrows. "Uh-oh, Teddy, this is my grandmother." "Hello, Teddy." Grandma gave him a firm handshake. "You can call me Miss Alice. Everybody else does." She gave him a visual once-over and then said to him, "That's quite a tan you have there. I hope you're using your sunblock." Teddy hesitated. Probably not as much as I should." "If you don't, you'll be sorry when you get to be my age. Lizzie, you always have plenty of sunblock. Give some to your friend here." "Yes, Grammy," Lizzie replied absently. She had begun to check her phone for email. "What are you two young people doing tonight?" Grammy asked. Lizzie's antenna immediately went up, and she eyed her grandmother suspiciously. "Why?" "We're having a book signing and expect a pretty big crowd. It's too much for Beck to get the seats ready by herself, and I'm too old to move furniture. We'll need some extra help setting up, and then afterwards getting everything back in order." She focused a hard stare on Lizzie. "I know you'll want to pitch in, won't you, Lizzie?" Lizzie looked like a trapped philanderer searching for an excuse before she could think of one. Teddy piped up, "Sure, we'd be happy to help, Miss Alice. We don't have any plans." The fierce gaze Lizzie sent at Teddy could have scorched the earth. He squirmed uncomfortably. "Well, we don't, do we?" Beck couldn't help chuckling. Grammy always found a way of getting what she wanted. "Good," Grammy said, rubbing her hands together. "The signing starts at 7 o'clock, so be here promptly at 6:15. It should last about an hour. Then afterwards, I'll need you to get all the tables and chairs back in place for the early crowd tomorrow." With that, Grammy was off to the kitchen with Coquina at her heels. The second she was out of hearing range, Lizzie buried her face in her hands. "Why did you have to say that, Teddy? I hate those things. All they do is talk about books. Books, books, books. It's so boring." Teddy shrugged. "I don't know. I was just trying to be helpful. Your grandma seemed like she really needed us." Beck noticed a customer heading toward the cash register, so she turned to leave. "And I really need help. The help, too," she said. "Thanks for volunteering, Teddy. And Lizzie, it won't kill you." Beck's choice of words may have been an omen. What she couldn't have realized was that there would be a killing that night, the first murder in Manti Bay Beach in over a year, and the victim would be someone at the signing.